All right, so today I want to tackle this pervading idea that more is better when it comes to hypertrophy. Firstly, thanks for making it onto my channel. If you have any questions or comments about today's discussion, pop them down below. And if you'd like to work with me on your own strength physique goals, there is a link in the description. So let's crack on with the day. Now, where this whole idea that more is better comes from, I think possibly originates from the whole muscle protein synthesis angle. The idea used to be that the more you stimulate a muscle, the more you get muscle protein synthesis, the more breakdown you get, and the more growth equals happy trainees, right? So more training equals more stimulus equals more growth. That was the general idea. We know that's not the case anymore, and that's kind of what I wanted to discuss today. So in 2019, Damas and his colleagues released a really good study, which was done within what they call a within subject design. So each leg was tested independently. So they had a high frequency group, already a high frequency leg, and a low frequency leg. Now, the side effect of that was the high frequencies also amassed more volume. So it really was a comparison of frequency and volume. So high frequency was about 5 times per week with higher volumes, and low frequency was about 2 or 3 times a week with lower volumes. Now, the interesting thing about this is that if we were to believe the whole muscle protein synthesis thing, then the idea that more synthesis, more stimulus would equal more gains would be true. And also, if you look at some studies that sort of Schoenfeld has done, the whole 45 set things, which seemed really unbelievable at the time, here the results were this. Some individuals showed greater muscle mass and strength gains after the high frequency. So 31.6 and 26.3% of individuals respectively. Other had greater gains with the lower frequency. And yet others, about a third, and yet others showed similar responses between high frequency and low frequency. So essentially, some people responded a lot better to high volumes, some people responded a lot better to low volumes, and yet others were somewhere in the middle. There was no clear-cut, definite better. And so that really starts to question this whole growing body of scientific literature we have, which seems to suggest that more is better, more is better. There is definitely more of a bell curve for most people, and individuality comes into play quite heavily as well. So before we move on, actually, where does this sit with the 45 sets protocol? I've said to you guys before that the whole Schoenfeld-Israetel body of science over the last sort of 5 or 10 years is a good one, and we can't discount it because the studies are what the studies are, the data are what the data are. But there is another body of research which is focusing on lower volumes of training and higher intensities. Work from Fisher and Steele and Damas shows that actually that is a valid alternative as well. So part of the reason that I'm pushing back on this video is to push back against this idea that more is better when it comes to volume. I want to just put into perspective that the last 10 years of research on hypertrophy has been very unusual in that volume has really been prioritized. But I also think we are just finding our way in terms of the research, and that wasn't the case prior to 10 years, the last 10 years. And prior to that, we really did prioritize heavy and hard training with a limited amount of volume rather than this escalating higher and higher amounts. But anyway, implications of what I've just said. Training which causes high amounts of damage. So training which causes escalatingly high amounts of damage might be good for certain people because, well, they get lots of stimulus. Now, if they can recover from that, it'll provide a really good stimulus that they can grow from. However, it might not also be so good because you might spend all of your resources on recovery. So let's say you deliver an amazing training session, you're just smashing your body with, I don't know, 25 sets per body part per week for a long time. Now, while that looks on paper like it should be really good muscle stimulus, if you're not able to actually recover from that because you're doing everything right, but just genetically you're not able to recover, what might happen then is it might not be as good for muscle growth. And in fact, you might end up just spending most of your time recovering and just trying to get back on even keel with all the damage that you're putting onto your muscles and less time actually growing. So if we match excessive training volumes with poor nutrition, that could even lead to muscle loss. And I think that possibly applies to a lot of people more than they like to believe. Quite a lot of people out there are willing to work really, really hard, but perhaps don't put in the time and effort required in the kitchen to deliver the necessary protein intake, necessary calories to actually do the work. So as a net result, they may actually lose muscle over time. That's something to be really careful of. So those are implications for you guys at home. Now, next, in terms of a summary of what I've just discussed, prescriptions for muscle growth are very individual. And I really, really want to push back against the idea that more volume is just better, period. It's just wrong. That's just completely wrong. It's false. And we need to get away from this thinking. More volume is definitely not better as a blanket prescription. Prescriptions must be highly individualized. And I feel that almost sounds really obvious when you say it, but if you look at the growing body of evidence, if you look at just the theme of what people think and believe on places like Reddit and whatnot, the whole idea that volume is the main driver of growth is just false. But it's a commonly held belief now due to the past 5 or 10 years of research. So I'm just here to say that that's actually not the whole body of research. And prior to 2010, we did things very differently, and we still got great results. So now, in the modern day, you've got concepts like MRV, and that I think gives rise to people wanting to find the upper limits of growth regularly as well, not just find their MRV, the maximum recoverable volume, but also find them regularly, every block, every 5 or 6 weeks. And implicit in the name maximum recoverable volume is finding the amount of work you can just recover from. We're not just trying to do that though. And as I said in the previous slide, recovery and growth are actually different processes. Like there's going to be a certain amount you can just recover from on even keel, but there's going to be a separate amount, and possibly a lower amount, which you can recover and optimally grow from as well. So these types of concepts, they can be really misapplied. So we shouldn't, because inherent in the MRV content, inherent in the actual name of it, is that we are trying to find the maximum recoverable volume. So, and also when it comes down to it, things like that Mike sometimes says, again, try not to rag on Mike. I like the guy, I really like the guy. But some of the things he says to do with like soreness, for example, like you should probably get sore some of the time. They're just not scientifically accurate. They're logical perhaps, but they're not actually accurate. The research doesn't tend to support that. So if you are truly evidence-based, you wouldn't make statements like that. So again, it's another one of those things which gives rise to this whole idea that people are looking to find their MRVs. So they'll just keep increasing. Sorry, mixing my words. So this idea that they'll just keep increasing their volumes over the course of a block to find that point where they are getting sore. But that may well be the point where they're just switching off the growth process. They're not able to keep up the recovery with the amount of growth with the stimulus. So it has implications, and I've seen it in the quote unquote evidence-based community that a lot of people have this impression that volume should be prioritized, and doing more and more, trying to aim for soreness, even if it's just once a block, is a good thing, when it's not scientifically accurate and it's not borne out by the research, and it's also not generally borne out by the experience of people who get big and strong. And this gives rise to some of my frustrations with the evidence-based crowd. I like to think I straddle experience and science very, very, very well, and I have done so for far longer than sort of 10 years. I've done for a good 20 years. My frustration with the evidence-based crowd is that this is just a bit of an aside, they can be very, very pro some concepts which are just really bro, and that they shouldn't be when it suits them. So things like, for example, soreness. Soreness is a big one. Like Mike says it, I said it on a number of podcasts, that you should be getting sore at least some of the time. That's not proven in the science whatsoever. It's not anything which even remotely is supported by the science. And then also things like protein intake. Protein intake has quite conclusively been proven to be on the lower end than most people think we need, like 0.8 grams per pound. A lot of the really high protein intakes, like 1.5 gram per pound, just aren't supported with the research. They may be supported in certain circumstances, which are not going to be studied by science. So to say they're better makes zero sense. And those are two areas where the evidence-based community seem to look upon favorably. They seem to turn a blind eye to the research and the science and just say, yeah, that feels better for me. Based on what? But then at the same time, they will then poo-poo fasting, keto, very low calorie diet, even though the research on those is really, really supportive. Like, it's madness. Like we are supposed to be evidence-based, but we're not being evidence-based whatsoever. We are turning a blind eye to the research when it suits us, and we are saying, yeah, we'll go with the bro thing when it suits us. What is that? That's nonsense. So that I don't like. But anyway, that's a bit of a side note. I get annoyed by that because prominent people in the evidence-based community, they have this bias towards certain things that they like, which is not based on research, and they have this real sort of problem with things that they don't like, even though they are fully supported by the research. The research on very low calorie diets is really beneficial. Go ahead and look it up. I'll do a video on it sometime. So implications for you. Getting back on track, calming myself down. Now, your own individual prescription has to be based on results. So you have to be very cerebral with your results, okay? Try not to let bodybuilding influences, whether they're bro law or whether they're evidence-based, and in some cases they're just as bad as each other. Try not to let those influence you. The bottom line should be your results. Are you getting results? Are you able to grow consistently, or are you getting injured on a regular basis, or are you not making progress? Can you objectively measure your growth? Evaluate your growth. Have markers of progression. I talk about this a lot on my channel. Have markers of progression. Pick 3 to 5 big compound exercises that you're going to get better on over the next 6 months, because that's the bottom line. That's all that matters. Did you get better? Yes, no. Evaluate, see what happens. Evaluate every block, see what happens. Be objective. Have a way of being objective. You can't just rely on what the law is saying, what the current bro law is saying, what the current research is saying. It's not always that accurate. And a lot of the people in the evidence-based sphere just full of shit. I just say it. Yeah, anyway, that is some of the implications and some things that you guys need to be aware of. So hopefully that was useful for you guys. And I realize I'm opening myself up to quite a lot of criticism from evidence-based people, but as I say, I just want to point out some of these things which are in the research. There are various bodies of research to do with hypertrophy over the last few years. All I would say is the bottom line is what works for you. And to know what works for you, you have to evaluate that objectively, not just to have a feeling, actually have provable results over a 6 month to a 12-month period. Work on those, figure out what worked, what didn't, improve that, and go on from there. Because all I'm interested in is helping you guys achieve, not scoring points in some weird evidence-based circle jerk. All right, I will call it there.